And a very good Friday morning to you from the University of Arizona's campus. The Rundown, Semester 2, the first show of the new year. David Mooradian, Ethan Glaich, catching you up with all the biggest sports stories in the last, really, month, Ethan. And there's a lot of places to go, but before we take a stab at it, I have one analogy that I've been thinking about. Not even an analogy, just a connection between two teams in different sports that I think are performing at a similar success rate. We'll put it that way. Ethan, I want you to weigh in on this, but let me get it out there first. So on the one hand, you have a team that's going to the Super Bowl, the New England Patriots. They surprisingly win the AFC with a record of 14-3 in the regular season. And then you have the Arizona Wildcats, our basketball team, who is undefeated and 2 victories away from both their best start in program history and their longest winning streak in program history. And that's significant when you consider that they're a team that has a history going back to the very early 1900s. So what Arizona is doing is already historically significant, and their victories against Arizona State and Oklahoma State away from making complete history, and those are games ESPN analytics give them a 95% chance or better of winning. Here's my connection. Neither one of those two teams have an identity. And you might be saying, well, that's not a good thing. I thought it's important for a team to have an identity. Some teams win in, let's say, in football, running the ball, or in basketball, they're great three-point shooting teams, or they're great defensively. But teams are supposed to have an identity. The New England Patriots do not have an identity. What are they? Are they a team with great quarterback play week in, week out? Do they win because of Drake May? Not every week. Are they a shutdown defense that, is lights out game after game? They've been really good in the playoffs. But no, I would not say that they win with defense every week. Are they a strong running team? They're not. All right, let's talk about Arizona. They play very strong defense, but is that the only thing that propels them? It isn't. They're a great rebounding team, but they can win other ways. Some people say they can't shoot the three. Well, Braden Burries has arguably been the best player the last couple of weeks. I would argue he's a pretty solid three-point shooter. They have Anthony Delorso as well. He's out there solely to make threes. The same is almost true for Dwayne Aristode. So Arizona is a versatile team. When they play against BYU, they can win one way. They gave up 83 points against BYU. The pace was inconsistent. Sometimes we were playing a full-court game. Other times, it was a little bit more on the half court. But the point is this. Arizona's number 1 in the country. The Patriots are in the Super Bowl. And they're not trapped by winning one way. What you'll see with the best teams in any sport is they're capable of adapting game to game, week to week, and doing what is required of them by their opponent in that moment. And when you're assessing if you have a team that can win a championship, you shouldn't be asking yourself, what is our identity? You should be asking yourself, do we have the capability to attack any opponent and win a variety of ways? And I think that's true both for the Patriots and it's true for the Arizona Wildcats. And that particularly, Ethan, not because of the undefeated record or one really strong facet, but the fact that I feel Arizona, with a bad three-point shooting night, can beat you other ways. With a bad rebounding night, which is hard to imagine, but it's possible, they can beat you other ways. So my confidence for them in a March Madness-style tournament comes from the fact that I think they'll be able to get through, short turnarounds against multiple different teams by relying on their versatility.
Yeah, I do mostly agree with you. I do think Arizona can beat teams in many ways. They've been shooting the ball much better over the past month-ish or so. But I think their identity is the size and the rebounding and the defense. They're so physical, so tough. They play every team so intensely. And they just out-rebound everybody pretty much with Krivas, Pete, a walk off the bench who's one of the best rebounders in the country. So I think if you have to put an identity on them, it would be rebounding. But there are other ways they can beat you. They can play fast. They can cause turnovers. They have no weaknesses, which is one of the things that very few teams have in college basketball. And I think that'll tremendously help them in the tournament. And they're looking to go far this year as they've beaten nearly everybody so far, 21-0, beating the past 3 champions. So they've definitely built a resume already, and they want to build more. The goal is a national championship. It's not to go undefeated. So,
well, just to piggyback on your point, and no question, Arizona's been a really strong rebounding team, but with a minute and a half left to go, they had a 10 or 12-point lead in Provo against BYU. BYU ended up having 9 more offensive rebounds than Arizona. So, yeah, it's just one game, but that game on Monday kind of affirmed what I just went out there and said, because rebounding had been the identity for most of the year. This is a game where, like I said, BYU had almost 10 more second chance looks, and Arizona was in a very, very strong position with a minute and a half to go. Obviously, they didn't close well, and that didn't really have to do with anything. But the game was almost over with 90 seconds left, and that's a game where Arizona, like I said, surrendered quite a few more offensive rebounds. So that was significant to me, Ethan. Yes, you're right. Rebounding has been their identity for most of the year. But on a night where it wasn't, they still were on the road against a ranked team and got the victory. So I think there's a lot of significance in that.
I happen to agree with you with BYU. The whole thing with BYU is we were up, 9 with 55 seconds left, and they hit a 3, or it was 10 with 55 seconds left.
It was even, if you go back,
it was
30
was
seconds,
it 11?
It was even worse than that.
It was 11, wasn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't.
It was somewhere. Great. It was some big number, and they hit a 3, and then they call an offensive foul on Jaden Bradley. Which, by the way, the referees to that game have been prone to giving BYU some very tacky calls over these past few years. I think they gave a game to Iowa State over the past few, or to BYU against Iowa State over the past few years, but. Yeah, we got a bad offensive foul call on Jaden Bradley on an inbound, and then the next few seconds you get a flagrant 2 on Braden Burries, which I didn't really like the call, but I see why they called that. So they got two free throws out of that, and then they hit another 3. So it was just a snowball effect, and we just kind of blew the lead, and Braden Burries, the player of the night, and one of the players of the college basketball season, great player. He's solidified himself as nearly a lottery pick.
There were some controversial calls, there's no question, just to get the facts behind it. So you couldn't quite remember. It was 82-71 after Bradley made both his free throws with a minute 22. BYU would cut into that lead with under a minute left.
Yeah,
so
we
at the
nearly
1 minute
lost
mark,
that game.
Up 11. You said it. There were some strange calls. It was kind of the perfect storm where BYU was knocking down their threes. Arizona was not making their free throws. The only player who you really trusted at the end of the game from the free throw line was Jaden Bradley. That's a concern in and of itself. Yeah, the calls perhaps didn't go their way, but Arizona was not settled in the final minute and a half, Ethan. They were really struggling to inbound the ball. They were struggling to get it past half court. So they didn't make it easy for themselves. I don't believe the issues they had against the Cougars in the final minute are going to come up again over the season. I don't think they're concerns. I think they're very correctable. Well, and if it emerges as a trend, then that's one thing. But I wouldn't expect that to be the case. We haven't seen Arizona in close games in a minute, but earlier in the year they had no issue closing out. I do think this will be more of a one-off situation. But like you said, there was a snowball effect, no question about it, and a perfect storm.
Yeah, it was in Provo, too, in BYU, tough place to go. And, they just made some shots, got some calls to go their way, and all of a sudden they're right back in it. With the snap of a fingers. It was one of the crazier things I've ever seen happen because it was a huge deficit over 5 possessions, and they just hit their shots at the end of the game. But I want to go back to your free throw point with Bradley being one of the very few free throw shooters on the team. Another one is a guy we've already mentioned, Braden Burries, because he hit, I think, 12 free throws in that game against BYU, which is just massive. And he came up huge on the defensive side. We nearly lost that game, which I wanted to talk about. With 5 seconds left, we're up 1. And we turned the ball over on an inbound, which I want to get to our inbound plays later. But with 5 seconds left, we turn the ball over, and they have the ball. We're down 1. They go to Dabansa in the post, and Braden Burries comes out of nowhere and just denies him. That guy, he's been all over the court recently. He started off kind of slow, not really scoring too many points. But recently, and really ever since the Alabama game, he's been our best player.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's close.
Well, the free throw point, we're kind of tiptoeing around just saying what it is. And Koa Pete is making 61% of his free throws right now.
Yeah, it's really bad.
And he's not a center. He's not even a power forward, right? I mean, he's a small forward. So his number, find me a long list of NBA players at his position that are 60% from the line. You're gonna
There's
take
nobody.
a while. Yeah.
And at the beginning of the year, the reason why I was so scared, for people that listen to this show, they know I've been kind of a not a hater, just a realist on this team because they haven't really shot the ball well. And Koa Pete, we said at some point he was going to have these slow games and these games where teams just smother him in the paint because they have size to match up with him and he's going to be quiet. And we've been seeing that recently. We saw it. He had a good second half against Cincinnati, it was Arizona State. He had a great second half against Arizona State, but in the first half he had like 2 points. He played. I don't remember what happened in the UCF game. I think he was under 10 points. Cincinnati he played well, and then West Virginia he was quiet. BYU he struggled as well, so he's been struggling as of late.
And you said it. It was the second half against Arizona State. The first half was really tough. He couldn't get a field goal to go. Since that Arizona State game, he was held to under 5 points against Central Florida, and then he's averaged about 13 points since then. So below his season average, and 13 points may sound, really great, but a lot of those are their mid-range jumpers. They're around the basket, even slams. So he's making really about 6 field goals a game near the hoop, which is, not to detract from that. There's significance in that. But certainly his free throw shooting is a concern, and just then a little bit streaky with shots you trust him to make. And I think some of that, Ethan, and I said this on one of our play-by-play or our live broadcasts, I don't recall which game. Some of that is he's getting the majority of the attention from the opponent. At the beginning of the year, yes, he's All-American, but he's still a freshman, so we'll kind of see how this goes. Maybe we'll give Bradley more attention or look down low. I think recently he's seeing a little bit more. I think he's being game planned for, and that there's going to have to be an adjustment to that. And other players, since Pete has been quiet, players like Burries and Krivas have really stepped up. So I think there's evidence to support opponents zeroing in on Koa Pete, and it's working to the benefit of the team as a whole. But the one thing that doesn't make a difference based on your opponent is the free throw line at 61%. That very nearly was an issue against BYU. Arizona looking ahead. They are going to play at the Sun Devils that's tomorrow, early. It's a midday game. It'll be noon o'clock Arizona time.
I think we're on national television.
So, yes, it is. And you have to think it's going to be a close game. Now, the point spread and the experts probably telling a different story, but remember, Arizona State came to the McHale Center very close. The Wildcats got
shocked everybody.
A lot more than they bargained for. Now, Arizona's going up to their building. Those games usually are close, regardless of the disparity in talent or rank, and probably the last game that Bobby Hurley's going to be coaching with the Sun Devils. So this is his last bite at the Arizona apple unless they meet in the Big 12 tournament. The reason I say that is I don't think you get the bluntness or the matter-of-factness from a coach unless they know this is it. He's in the last year of his contract. He's been criticizing the university, their ability to fund players, their attendance at home, the atmosphere. I don't think those are comments you make if you're really trying to get a new contract. I think he's come to terms with where he is, and he's speaking candidly. So I expect this to be his last game against Arizona. Will that be a motivating factor for the Sun Devils? That remains to be seen. But like I said, expecting a close game. Now, the other side of that coin, if you want to disagree with me, is Arizona State played as well as they can play, and they still came up short here in Tucson. So can the Sun Devils replicate that performance? Can they elevate the way they did? That would probably surprise me, but there are some different variables, notably the game being on the road. But Arizona State, Ethan, like I said, I don't know how much better they can play than they did a few weeks ago. Are you expecting a close game tomorrow?
I think it'll be a bigger margin than it was here in Tucson because you look through their game stats and they hit 11 threes. They didn't miss in the last 10 minutes, I don't think. We were at that game. We were broadcasting it. For those that want to listen, you can listen right here. But They did not miss in that last few minutes. They hit 3 after 3 after 3. I think they came away with 11 on the game, and Mo Odom was just incredible getting to all of his spots. So, they came to play that day. They came with intensity. They came with energy. And, I don't think they're going to be as energized because they're at home rather than playing here in McHale. I think they really wanted to win that game in Tucson against the number one team in the country. So I do think it'll be a bigger margin, but they're definitely going to come out and play once again.
Another player, before we transition away from Arizona basketball, and certainly you could do the whole show talking about the number one team in the country right now. We saw what Charles Barkley said, the Arizona Wildcats starting to get some national attention. If you didn't hear, basically that he expects the NCAA tournament, March Madness, to be the Arizona Invitational, that he's been very impressed by the Wildcats this year, and how could you not be? One player I want to highlight that, we like to talk about the freshmen and Burries and Pete. Bradley is, senior, is a fan favorite, but Ivan Karchenkov, he has been the definition of versatility. He is a championship piece, in my opinion, a player that every team needs one of.
Yeah.
And I think he really affirms what I was saying at the top of the show. He's averaging just under 10 points a game, and the rebounding, the defense, it's all there. I mean, he's 75% from the free throw line. He kind of reminds me, as a Knicks fan, of Josh Hart, but somebody that if you need a gritty rebound, if you need a stop at the end of the game, playing on both sides of the court, even in a 10 or 20 second span, he's exactly that. And I think Arizona's really fortunate to have him, and that was a key player to get for Tommy Lloyd in the offseason.
Yeah, for sure. I do think he's one of the best fifth options in the nation. I mean, you've got Burries at 1, Pete at 2, Bradley at 2, Pete at 3, then Krivos 4, and Karchenkov 5. He's got all the tools you want for a wing player. He's got long arms. He plays tenacious defense. He rebounds pretty well. He can get to the basket. He's got a good game inside of the arc, so he can shoot the mid-range a bit. He's hit a few threes too in this season, but not the best three-point shooter, I have to say. He was, I think, 0 for 4 against West Virginia. But he definitely is a phenomenal player. I made this comparison for Karchenkov on the broadcast. He's kind of like Kawhi Leonard before Kawhi Leonard's offensive bag, with the long arms, the small forward, can kind of fly to the ball like a safety almost. So he's been a phenomenal pickup from Bayern. He played in Eurobasket before this, and then he came to be a freshman here. So he's definitely come onto the scene for this team, and he's becoming a fan favorite. I also love when he makes a good play on defense, and then he goes to the student section and he flexes, and everyone gets so hyped about it. He's definitely a great energy in the building and a great player to bring overseas.
He can be demonstrative. There's no question about that. He doesn't shy away from revving up the fans, like you said, Ethan, and I think he's the type of player that any fan base will rally around because he is so active throughout the court. He's a high-effort, high-speed kind of player. So Ivan Karchenkov, I want to highlight him. Then, of course, you've got the bigs. Between Krivos and Awaka, they're averaging 21 points and 17 rebounds, almost 18 rebounds aggregate between the two of them. It is really difficult for opponents to counter the size and the skill that those two possess. And when one of them goes to the bench, there's no respite. And sometimes you've got to tend with both of them on the floor at the same time. So Arizona, like I said, it's hard to nitpick. It's hard to see them getting tripped up, especially in a tournament where you have a lot of consecutive games. And they are incredibly versatile, but a lot of it starts with their size. When you have size, you have options. And they've got those two big players. They've also got guys like Karchenkov and Pete that aren't playing, all the way down low, but have plenty of size to make do. So it's that combination of Krivos and Awaka. Not only, offensively do they have the advantage with the offensive boards, but they're both defending incredibly well, and they're both capable of knocking down free throws in key situations. The free throws weren't quite there for Arizona at the end of the BYU game, but on the season, both of their numbers are where you want them for bigs. And again, it's tough to nitpick those two guys, and they're doing what Tommy Lloyd is asking them to do. Defensively, they're able to, get outside if they have to. They're able to get up on the ball, and we've seen Arizona be pretty aggressive at times this season, but they can also protect the rim down low. So it's a real combination that Lloyd has there.
Yeah, Krivas is I think he's one of the more efficient players in college basketball too. Down in the post, when he gets the ball in the paint, he's so tall and so big that he just puts it over all the defenders. I'm going over you. It's going in every time. He was 7 for 9, I think, against Cincinnati. He has these nights where he just goes for like 20 and 13, which is just incredible. You know, we have like 4 guys that can all go for 20 plus on any given night, and it's just when you have a rotation that's this deep and this strong, like it's gonna be tough to beat anywhere. You know, we've seen it through this first 2 months of college basketball.
Yep.
And you know we've got a tough stretch coming up, so we could lose to one of those very good teams: Kansas, Tech, BYU, Houston, one of those 4. But you know this team, like they just had a collapse at the end of the game in Provo. Like they were up 20 the whole game. They were up 20 the whole game. It wasn't close until the last 5 seconds at all.
Well, they went on a real push right before the half, and they held that lead. There wasn't many runs. In a basketball game, you expect, all right, they're up 12. 2 minutes later, they're back up 2, and then maybe back up 12. You expect that ebb and flow, and it really wasn't there. Arizona held steady and kept BYU right around that 10-point deficit until that final minute and a half. But again, I don't think those will be recurring issues, and certainly if you froze the game with 2 minutes left to go, it would have been, I think, their most impressive performance of the year, considering the atmosphere they were playing and the quality of the opponent and the dominance that they maintained. It really would have been a statement. They still get the win, and that's all that matters at the end. But there could have been a major statement factor. Not that a team that's 21-0 has to do much in the headline writing, Ethan. You know,
they definitely are getting all the attention they need and probably deserve. I mean, they're just unbelievable. They might be the best college basketball team I've seen since I started watching college basketball. Like,
it's fair to say.
They don't lose and they blow good teams out. Like they just demolish good teams, which is something I've really never seen in their own buildings, not to mention.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. The final note here before we move on, this is giving credit to the head coach, Tommy Lloyd. His last 40 games, or his only 40 games, against top 25 opponents as the coach of Arizona, he's 27-13. So you have to think you're winning about 2/3 of your games against ranked opponents.
I like my odds.
That aren't, you're going to be a high seed. You're going to be top 1, 2, or 3 seed pretty much every year. So again, it's the Arizona Wildcats taking on Arizona State tomorrow. Arizona looking to tie their longest program winning streak ever at 22 games. Tomorrow they can break the record at home the Saturday after against Oklahoma State. That game is at noon on TNT, Arizona time, of course, up in Tempe. Arizona's favored by 15.5 points, despite beating Arizona State by 7 at home. The odds makers are bullish on their chances to demolish their in-state rival tomorrow. And you said you expect the margin to be
I was
bigger.
going to say 12, 13, 6, 7 possessions, 6, 7.
Is that right?
But, no, I definitely think it'll be more one-sided because, you know, we were like, okay, we're so good. We're coming off all of these easy wins, and then Arizona State comes into our building who's not been particularly good, and you know it's a rivalry, so they're gonna play their best game of all time. You know, that's just how it works in sports. We see that all the time. So Arizona wasn't ready for it, but I think they will be in Tempe.
Before we get to the upcoming Super Bowl between the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks next Sunday, that game 9 days away, I have to talk about how I spent my night yesterday, just very quickly, Ethan, because it was a long night, and I wouldn't change a thing. I would do everything exactly the same. It started out at about 9 o'clock, and Carlos Alcaraz was playing Alexander Zverev, and you're not expecting that great of a match, right? Alcaraz doesn't ever seem to be challenged until he gets to the final, and he wasn't. I mean, this was not a competitive match, really. Yeah, the second set was a tiebreaker. The first set, Alcaraz had the one break he needed, but he was in complete and total control. Then I believe Alcaraz is up a break in the third set, and it looks like we're looking at a 90-minute match, exit stage left, and Carlos is walking. I mean walking into the championship on Sunday morning here in Arizona. All of a sudden, and it's 90 degrees. It's not as hot as it had been earlier in the week in the tournament, but it was plenty warm. All of a sudden, Carlos goes up for a point up by the net, and you have that hesitation and then that really slow movement, looks down at his thighs, and he was hurt. And it was serious cramping. It wasn't anything more than that, and there's some controversy about the rules and what you can and can't do. You're not allowed to take an injury timeout for cramps. Of course, sometimes you don't know anybody who's ever had a serious cramp, and that's most people in an athletic contest. It's hard to know if you're actually hurt or if it's just a cramp in the moment. I mean, it can be really, really strong. And Carlos was really favoring his left side, and then ultimately he was cramping in both legs. So he went from this match was over to he basically wasn't moving the remainder of the third set. He was not going after balls. He was not playing, and speed is one of his key strengths out there on the court. And he couldn't use it all. He was playing like a veteran, like a 40-year-old, had to play very tactical, moving the ball around. With that said, Ethan, Carlos Alcaraz still had a game he needed. He was a break away from winning. It was 6-5 when Zverev was serving. Almost got it, and that's playing on basically one leg. And then it goes to a tiebreaker, and he was in the tiebreaker for a minute before dropping that. Then you're saying he was about to quit. And there was one sequence, Ethan, where he went up to the net, and I think he was going to put his hand out for a handshake, and then he thought again of it and kind of changed course and walked to his respective bench, and he kind of apologized to Zverev, like, I didn't mean to confuse you there, but I don't think he knew what he was going to do. I think he was seconds away from retiring that match in the fourth set. Continued on, had chances in the fourth set, which is remarkable because if you're watching the third and fourth set, he was not moving, and he was nearly, winning as it was. He was competitive at such a disadvantage, and then, time was on his side in the fact that the weather was getting colder, the sun was getting lower. I think by the fifth set, the stadium was fully shaded, and he was returning to his form as he was in the beginning of the game, but he had to dig himself out of a hole. He was down an early break in the fifth set, and about halfway through, you started seeing him getting after balls he wasn't getting to in the middle sets, and like I said, returning to the player he was. And then by the end, he was Carlos Alcaraz again, whether that was adrenaline or the cooler temperatures, probably a combination of the two. But he was down. I mean, he was almost out. Zverev led that final set 5-3, and Alcaraz got two breaks, and he held serve twice, and he ended up winning really in remarkable fashion, 7-5 there in the fifth set to move on to the final. And then overshadows Ethan. Carlos, and that match ended up going 5 hours and 27 minutes, by the way. And like I said, that was a 90-minute match for the majority of the first three sets. Before the injury, that was an hour and a half. It ended up going 5.5 hours. Now, maybe not a great look for Alexander Zverev, the number 3 player in the world, that he couldn't win that match against Carlos Alcaraz.
Hurt Carlos Alcaraz.
Who was playing on one leg for 2.5 sets. Now, it overshadows what Novak Djokovic did last night. Now, in the U.S. Open, Djokovic had a match against, I believe it was Sinner.
Did you stay up for it, by the way?
A little bit.
It was at like 4 a.m.
I saw the start, which is all I needed to do. And every once in a while, I'd kind of like wake up and see what was going on. But I really couldn't. I can't say I watched a great deal of it. But here's what I do know. The last year and a half, Djokovic has not been on or particularly close to the competitive level of Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. He just hasn't been there. And these two are spotting in 15, almost 20 years to their youth. But it just hasn't quite been there. Djokovic is able to dominate the other 100-plus players in professional tennis, but those two usually can't get past the third set, never to a fifth set. And so, all right, Sinner has kind of been cruising at the one slip-up where he was cramping himself, but the temperatures were cool by the time they took the court, so you're not expecting much. And by God, with just a vintage performance and determination of a real champion and probably the greatest tennis player of all time is Novak Djokovic, certainly has the most major titles, most Grand Slams, he won that match in 5 sets. At 38 years old against Jannik Sinner, who is in the absolute peak of his career. This is as good as it's going to get for Sinner. Meanwhile, Djokovic, he is like the LeBron James of tennis right now. He's very much, at the tail end of his career. And some are speculating every time he plays a tournament now, it could be his last at that respective venue. And here he is beating the player who was number one in the world for much of last year, much of 2025, beat him at the Australian Open where Sinner had just won the last 2 years. He's in the final against perhaps a dinged-up Carlos Alcaraz, and a 38-year-old Novak Djokovic has a chance to win his 11th Australian Open. It is remarkable.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be an accomplishment, to say the least. Djokovic been doing it for years.
Well, what it reminds me of, Ethan, is, Tom Brady, right? And with 6 Super Bowls after he was with the Patriots, he was probably going to be the GOAT, right? You never know what happens after you, and Patrick Mahomes got to 3 pretty quick, so that conversation could have been ignited. But Tom Brady goes to Tampa, and he wins the Super Bowl, and everyone says, all right, he did it 2 places. He's got 7 Super Bowls. That's kind of that, right? This conversation's over. To me, it feels like Djokovic with 24 titles is close to the remainder, and going from 24 to 25 wouldn't change much. But doing it at 38 years old,
yeah,
I think it puts him comfortably in a different stratosphere for at least the next decade. I really think that it would be like that 7th championship for Tom Brady.
I have to agree with you there, because tennis is definitely a youth sport. It's
there's no question.
How quickly can you get to the ball? How can you spin the ball?
And there's a pure strength aspect of it as well. He's 38 years old. Alcaraz and Sinner, they put
these
a great
27, 28-year-olds are
23. And it's they're serving 130 miles per hour, like you said, the speed to get up to the net, and just the power and the strength of some of their forehands. I mean, he's 38 years old, and he's countering every blow, and it was such a combat. What's amazing about watching him right now, Ethan, is it's not a tremendous physical disadvantage because he keeps himself in such incredible shape, but he is 15 years older. It's the combination of the knowledge that he has, and he just has great understanding of how the ball is going to react from when both players strike it, how to position himself, much to the great advantage over his opponents. That's the first thing, but he's got this determination. Every point, it seems like his life is on the line, and that mix, it's very, very hard to root against him.
It's really just about the IQ of Djokovic, and he's been there before and he's done it. It's like when Brady goes to the AFC Championship, and you're like, okay, he's been here 10 times. He's gonna put up a nice game because it's Tom Brady in the AFC Championship. Or over the past 10 years, it's been Patrick Mahomes every time. And, you're like, okay, well, you don't bet against Mahomes because he's the greatest. He's been the greatest quarterback for the past 10 years. But, it's just about the IQ and the belief that you're going to win. And when you believe, things start to happen, and you have the background knowledge, and you have all the tools to win the game. You have the skills. You might have a declining athleticism, but you have the athleticism still.
Right.
So it's more about just believing and, wanting to, get your 25th, which is an incredible milestone. And, Djokovic could very easily beat a dinged-up Alcaraz. But it's going to be a good match because Alcaraz is going to get some time to rest. And, he's by far, in my opinion, the best tennis player in the world.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. Now, the odds makers, they think, obviously, and Alcaraz admitted after the game, it was just cramps, so you expect that to subside for the most part by Sunday. Alcaraz is the heavy favorite against Novak Djokovic. His odds to win the match are minus 330, so that's an implied percentage of, 80, I would say about 80%. Novak Djokovic is plus 262 to win the Australian Open. That will be a little bit after midnight here in Arizona, the early parts of Sunday morning. It'll be Sunday primetime in Australia on the other side of the world. All right, we've waited long enough. The New England Patriots are representing the AFC. The Seattle Seahawks are representing the NFC. There's one narrative I want to push back on before we kind of preview the game, and we'll have all next week to break it down into a fine powder. So we really should be in the business of recapping what we've seen here, Ethan, with the time we have next week. Mm-hmm. And I want to start here. Now, the Seahawks, what they've done is very impressive. And both of these teams, what I respect is they were not on anybody's list to go to the Super Bowl, nonetheless, to win their own divisions or even to make the playoffs at the beginning of the year. I mean, they just weren't. And they have ignored the noise, and they've proved everybody wrong. So that's the first thing. But Seattle is getting a lot more national respect than New England. And
Well, I think there's a reason for that.
well, we're going to talk about those reasons, but I think that it shouldn't work against the Patriots that they've played great defense in the playoffs. And they scored plenty of points in the regular season, and I do think that their offense has capabilities. They've also played in much worse weather. I mean, they had a very windy, cold day against Houston at home. They're playing up in the Northeast against the Chargers, and their offense came to life in the second half in that game. And they played in a snowstorm in the second half against the Broncos. So I don't know exactly what you're expecting from the offense, but the defense has been very strong. And I don't think that should work against them. I think NFL fans have a bias where a team that struggles defensively and scores a lot, they are going to say they're playing a lot better than a team the inverse. But the bottom line is the Patriots got themselves to the Super Bowl, and I don't think it's a mirage. They were 14-3 in the regular season. So I think they're being a little bit disrespected. I know you don't quite agree with that, so why don't you tell me why I'm wrong?
I don't think it's being disrespected. I mean, when we watch the games, you've said all year long that they're legit, and they have a great offensive coordinator, great culture head coach guy Mike Vrabel, who's in competition for the coach of the year, and I think he's going to win it after a 10-year turnaround. But they're 14-3. They're just playing well, and they're beating up on these teams like you said through the middle of it, and all the way back to the middle of the season. But when you get to the playoffs, you get five sacks. I think it was 8 sacks on Justin Herbert. His offensive line was nowhere to be found, and their offense didn't play particularly well. They moved the ball, they just didn't score points.
Right.
Kind of like the Texans did to the Steelers. They moved the ball, they just didn't score points. They kept turning the ball over. I think May had 3. But you play 3 points scored on your defense, which is absolutely incredible against one of the top quarterbacks. You have to give them credit for that. Then in the divisional round, you play a C.J. Stroud meltdown. 4 interceptions in one half. It was a complete chaos on the offensive side for the Houston Texans, which was, as my good buddy Reed likes to say, heartbreak hotel. But it was heartbreak. It was misery for me to watch that game. But nonetheless, they were flying. I mean, their defense they looked like up to par with our defense almost, which is, in my opinion, great. And I think a lot of other people think that too. But then you get to Denver, and you're against a backup quarterback, and you put up 10 points in the first half, which isn't too bad. And you have to give him some leeway because of the snowstorm. But when you're playing a backup quarterback, you should be able to put more than 10 points on the board.
Well, I mean, the backup quarterback isn't playing defense, but I hear your point. And the Broncos probably moved the ball better than New England did in the second half. So there is certainly something to that. And I think the Patriots offense will be fine. Now, Seattle defensively, very strong team. Now, the Rams did score 27 points against Seattle, but that's one of the top offenses, one of the best attacks in the NFC, probably in the NFL. It's going to make for an interesting game, there's no question. But my point is, I just don't hear a lot of people giving the Patriots a chance. The line at 4.5 is probably about right. But New England is incredibly inexperienced. The Seahawks aren't. I mean, the Seahawks are just as inexperienced when it comes to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. Sam Darnold has as much playoff experience as Drake May, with one more game. I mean, last year they got brutalized against the Rams with Minnesota. That's the only difference.
It's definitely some misery from some Jets and Texans fans here watching the Patriots go back to the Super Bowl, who destroyed the Texans in the past decade over the 2010s and with Tom Brady, and now they're beating us again and they're back. And then from a Jets perspective, you're seeing Sam Darnold go to the Super Bowl
against the Patriots. Yeah, against the Patriots.
It's mind-boggling because Darnold was out of the league.
Yeah,
he was done. He was benched week 5.
Couldn't cut it with Carolina.
In Carolina.
Yeah,
who's been one of the worst programs in the NFL since Cam Newton. So it's just, all of a sudden he's learning under Shanahan, and all of a sudden it clicks for him, and now he's phenomenal. Like he's so good.
Yeah.
Against the Rams, he had 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like what? Where was that with the Jets?
It wasn't there, and you said it. I think coaching was significant, and I was recounting with somebody yesterday or a couple days ago Now, you said Kyle Shanahan and Kevin O'Connell for the Vikings. I mean, those are two guys that if they can't get you right, then obviously nobody will. But the Jets had a key decision after 1 year of Todd Bowles, who's had some success with Tampa. But they go their separate ways with Bowles after 4 seasons. And with the opening, Darnold was going into his second year, Ethan, and they ended up going with Adam Gase, which I think broke him and set him back for years. Mike McCarthy. Now, say what you will about Mike McCarthy. Dak Prescott had probably the best years of his career in Dallas with McCarthy. Aaron Rodgers was developed by Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. McCarthy may not be a great game manager, or his offenses are a little bit stale. Whatever criticism, it doesn't make it in the playoffs. All right, he can develop quarterbacks. I think he's one of the better guys in the league at doing that. And he wanted the Jet job in 2019, and they didn't give it to him. They gave it to Adam Gase instead. And you have to think, we're seeing that Darnold is capable of playing at a high level in the league. If Mike McCarthy was hired by the Jets, it's all speculation, but it could have been a completely different story for New York, and that may be one of the biggest mistakes in a litany of mistakes made by the organization. That one may be at the top for the New York Jets.
Well, what was Gase's resume? Wasn't he coming over from Miami?
He had a losing record with the Dolphins in 3 seasons.
Was he the head coach?
Yeah. And the thing that won the Jets over, there were 2 things. Peyton Manning called up because Adam Gase was really proficient at getting coffee for Peyton Manning in Denver. And he was impressed by that. That's the first thing. And the second thing was he was 5-1 against the Jets. Who wasn't 5-1 against the Jets in that 3-year span? I mean, I can't believe that was a selling point by the Gase camp to hire him. But he's been dominating us for 3 years. We may as well have him. The Jets were dominating themselves and have been for 15 years. That's what got him over.
I definitely don't think 5-1 should be an argument.
That's at the press conference.
Yeah,
they were we were impressed by it. Every time we played him, he beat us. We were 5-1 against us.
Coming from a Texans fan who's been struggling against the Jets, seems like every single time we play you guys, you could make that argument.
When I heard them say, I said, "What? Who cares? They're horrible."
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those
when
3 years,
when you're averaging 5 wins,
that's what
a
they
season.
were. Those 3 years, they were 5-11, 5-11, and 4-12.
Yeah, it's.
Oh, he was 5-1 against the Jets. Well, isn't that great? He was 23-25 in the NFL. Why didn't he go to the playoffs more than once then? If he was playing the Jets, playing the Jets twice, he should be the 1 seed for God's sake.
Yeah, you definitely have to look at how the division, you only play them twice, and you can't really just look at the division and how they play against your own team.
Absolutely not.
So it's definitely something that you could look back on, and hindsight's obviously 2020.
Well, I mean, people, including myself, were pounding the table. Then, hey, Mike McCarthy publicly stated he wanted the job. I mean, yeah, okay, the things didn't end great in Green Bay. He wanted the job, and the Jets didn't give it to him. They hired Adam Gase instead, and the rest is history. There you go. So we have all next week to preview Seattle against New England. That's how I want to spend the week. I want to do this instead. There's been a lot of developing stories in the NFL, coaching changes and so forth. So anything that's caught your attention, if not, Ethan, I can start with 1 or 2 things. There's been some curious choices. I can't recall a year with as many coaching changes, openings as this
There was
year.
There was a lot.
So what has really caught your mind? What do you think are some of the top stories regarding coaches?
Where did Saleh go again?
He's with Tennessee.
He went to Tennessee, and didn't they just hire an OC
Brian
as well?
Dable.
Yeah, I definitely like that. Sort of offensive, defensive, mix there. I think Dable's great at developing a quarterback. He did it with Allen, and then he did it nearly again before he got fired with Jackson Dart, who was playing great. They just, his management, and they lost some games that they should have won. But
exactly,
Jackson Dart was playing phenomenal.
Yep.
I mean, a reckless guy. He's extending plays. He's making stuff happen. He's getting receivers open down the field. He's hitting them, and the run game's working with Scatabo.
To add to your point, the impressive thing about Dart and Allen, these guys weren't number 1 overall picks. I mean, they were both viewed as projects. Allen was taken 7th, Dart 26th, and they were viewed as, hey, they've got a lot of upside, but it's going to take a minute for them to realize that. And he got them both to realize their upside in a pretty timely manner. So I think that's very impressive. Cam Ward, number 1 overall pick in Tennessee.
That was exactly my next point. Was another great quarterback or project, you could say, for Dable to work on is Cam Ward. He's got all the tools you want. He can extend just like Dart and Allen can. He can move around in the pocket. He's got good poise. He's good over the middle. He's got a good spiral. He throws the ball hard. He's got all the tools to be a good quarterback in the NFL. So I definitely think that was the right hire for an offensive coordinator if you're the Tennessee Titans. Then you move to the defensive side, and Robert Saleh has been one of the better defensive coordinators in the NFL for nearly a decade now.
Almost, yeah.
So that combination of Dable, who's got a good offensive mind with great developing quarterbacks, and then a great defensive mind too in there. Both head coaches, I think Tennessee did a fantastic job, and that would be the one that I pick out of the bunch, which I hate to say because they're in my division. But.
Right. Well, it's going to be a great tandem, I think, and you hit on all the high notes. An interesting change by Saleh going to Tennessee after his experience with New York was he wanted to be a CEO-type coach with the Jets. He entrusted Jeff Ulbrich to call the plays defensively, and obviously he doesn't have an offensive background, but he is going to be the head coach of the defense. That's going to be his approach, and Dable is going to be the head coach of the offense. So they've got two big personalities in there, two guys with great credentials on their side of the ball. Now, obviously, when it comes to calling timeouts and challenging and those sorts of things, it's going to be Saleh's decision, but he is conceding a lot of power to Dable and taking more share of the defensive assignments, which I think is going to be a smart choice by Robert Saleh. It's hard to push back on that. I think he's a great defensive coordinator, and he shouldn't take away one of his strengths when he's a head coach, and that's something he did with the Jets.
For sure. There was one more point that I wanted to make about coaching, and I guess I'll make it and then explain it after.
Yeah.
We're really seeing over this past year, maybe 2 years, just how important coaching is in the NFL. Not has been, is. You go to both teams in the Super Bowl where they were not great last year. I think Seattle had 7 wins around there. Not Tennessee. New England was 4-13. And then they both fire their head coaches. They pick up great guys, Mike McDonald in Seattle, Mike Vrabel in New England.
This isn't McDonald's first year.
This isn't McDonald's first year?
He's been there a couple.
Oh, he's been there for a few.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's on me. I thought he was just there.
Vrabel, you're right.
Yes, Vrabel just turned around a 4-13 team, and now they're 14-3 with, that's one of the best coaching jobs we've seen in a long time. And then you go back to the NFC and you go to the Bears with Ben Johnson and great offensive mind for a young, very talented quarterback, which we've seen develop over this past year in Caleb Williams. But they had, 5 wins the year before, and now they're the 2 seed in the NFC.
Right.
So there's definitely a lot of importance and a lot of factors that play into the NFL with coaching. And I think coaching is just very underrated, and it's something that needs to be looked at more because these are the guys that are leading your team.
Well, I think it's looked at plenty when you consider the openings that have been made this offseason. Owners are, if anything, they're more impatient to make changes and quick-triggered. But this is McDonald's third year. An interesting storyline. I want to see how many years he's been with Seattle. I thought this was his third. He was born in Boston, and they're playing the Patriots in the Super Bowl, so it's a little bit of a reverse homecoming for McDonald. And you said it, Vrabel, his first year, big turnaround. The AFC, really, there are so many coaches that are year 1 or 2 at the beginning of next year. You think about the Texans, maybe have one of the longer tenured guys in DeMeco Ryans at this point. He's going into his 4th season. Andy Reid, and that's pretty much it. But you think about the stalwarts there in the AFC. John Harbaugh, he's with the Giants now. Mike Tomlin is at home for at least the time being. Bill Belichick, right? He's at the University of North Carolina. So it's hard to recognize the AFC from just 2 or 3 years ago. And an interesting move, I think the Giants, just quickly, there's another show at 11, but I think that the Giants made a very strong move by getting John Harbaugh. I think that is going to work out well.
I agree.
Mike Tomlin retires from Pittsburgh, and they go to McCarthy. Now, I was just singing the praises of Mike McCarthy, but the Jets would have been a completely different fit, and I don't think it's a fit in Pittsburgh, and there's no young quarterback there. That would have been the reason I would have hired Mike McCarthy for the Jets 6 years ago, was because you've got that young quarterback and you trust McCarthy to develop. But in Pittsburgh's case, I thought they needed a younger coach and a complete rebuild and just knock it down and start fresh. and instead they're going to try to retool and max out what they have now, and I don't think they have a great deal. I think it's a very strange hire by the Steelers.
I feel like it was an interesting hire. I don't think their team is particularly good anywhere. They didn't have the best offense, and they didn't have the best defense by any means. However, they do have some good pieces. Like every team, they have a great defensive line with Highsmith, Hayward, T.J. Watt. They have some good young corners, Joey Porter, and they also have Jalen Ramsey now, who's way out of his prime, but he's still a big name, Jalen Ramsey. So they definitely have some pieces on defense. The offense, you kind of need to find that quarterback if you're bringing in McCarthy. And he's developed multiple quarterbacks in the past. So why would you wait around? Why wouldn't you go find a guy either down the board that you could try to develop, or maybe get rid of Aaron Rodgers and try to go for one of those top picks next year.
Well, you have to wonder how much Aaron Rodgers weighed in, and he shouldn't be. Or not weighed in, but how much Art Rooney considered Rodgers
I didn't even think
in
about
the
that.
McCarthy choice. And I would hope a quarterback that maybe is going to retire right now and at most is going to play one more season, that the Steelers didn't consider him at all. But it's hard to believe they didn't when you think about the fact that they were aligned for almost a decade or more than a decade in Green Bay. Now, they have Will Howard. He was a fifth-round pick last year from Ohio State. Or I think Ohio State then to Syracuse for a year. But you don't think a fifth-round pick is particularly going to be their future. You don't know how much he's learned behind Aaron Rodgers. But, yeah, to me, the Steelers are kind of in no man's land, and they're not going to have a premium pick this year because they did make the playoffs. Defense has really been regressing, which you pointed out. And the quarterback position, their future right now is in the hands of a fifth-round pick. So wouldn't have been a job at the top of my list. Pittsburgh's a storied franchise, but it's really hard to see their direction. And maybe the silver lining is the AFC North, which has always been the cream of the crop, the top division in the NFL. The Ravens are on a downward trend here. The Browns are kind of a mess. The Bengals have a lot of things to figure out. So the division is kind of weak, and that's why Pittsburgh was able to make the playoffs this year. They capitalized on that. But it's a strange situation we're in. And a lot of the coaching changes, like I said, it's hard to recognize the league. Certainly the AFC and the AFC North, I don't think is going to be strong next year. On the other side, the AFC West, I think, is going to be quite strong. Mike McDaniel, an offensive coordinator hire for Jim Harbaugh, that looks like a really tough tandem. I think that's going to be a real benefit for Justin Herbert. Obviously, the Chiefs have Mahomes. You've got the Broncos, who were a play or two away from going to the Super Bowl. And the Raiders are going to get that number one pick. They're going to land Mendoza. Looks like they're going for Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator for Seattle. Now, you don't know that yet because the Seahawks season isn't over, but that certainly seems to be the trend there. And that, on the other side, could make for a really compelling division. And we'll see what the Raiders can get out of Mendoza. There is talent on the offensive side. Their trench play, I think, is really poor. But you've got Brock Bowers and Genti. So what do you make of the Raiders' chances, Ethan? And if they hire Kubiak, do you think that'll hurt Seattle?
I think Kubiak's a good hire. The Seahawks offense has been nothing short of fantastic this year. So, they're one of the premier offenses in the NFL. I think they average 30 points a game, which put them in the top three with New England and with LA. But yes, it's definitely going to be a good hire for them if that happens. I think Mendoza has some traits that you like as a number one pick. I think he's very smart. I think he's got a good sense of the game. He can extend. You're just kind of questioning, when he gets to the NFL and all the players are just as good as the others, how well is he going to do? Because Indiana seemed to just steamroll everybody this year, and he didn't have to do too much. So there's definitely some questions there with Mendoza. But, he's the only quarterback in the draft now that Dante Moore went back to school. So you kind of have no option as the number one pick, but you have, there's definitely some traits there that you have to like.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And my favorite quote, and we'll finish on this, Urban Meyer, when he went from Ohio State to Jacksonville, he said it's like coaching against it's like playing against Alabama. He was the Ohio State coach. It's like playing against Alabama every week. And the prep and the quality of the opponent is really strong. And that was kind of mocked and thrown in his face because it showed he was over his head. But I think it's accurate when you're talking about the transformation from college to the NFL. It's like playing against Alabama every week. If that's true, Mendoza doesn't have much to worry about because Indiana beat Alabama by about 30-plus points in the Rose Bowl. So we'll leave it there. Next week, we're going to have a little bit of a different look. We'll still have the rundown at this hour, but some new shows to bring you a different kind of format, and we'll start to formulate our new pick segment. And we know that the NFL pick segment, the football pick segment, didn't go well for myself or Ethan or anybody. But we thank you so much for listening to the rundown on this Friday. We hope you enjoy your weekend. We hope to see you next week.